Okay, we're recording.
Okay, great.
So I'll just get right into it. So I want to start back in May 1993 when you co-founded Visioneer and you created a whole new product, consumer product, and developed a business plan that led to a valuation of $600 million. And then you also won 15 top awards for best in category and industrial design. And I'm just wondering, how did you take an idea and concept and transform it into a company? And who were your co-founders?
So there was a guy who had this idea of if fax machines were simple and low cost and easy by just dropping a piece of paper in it, scanning at the time was really painful. Everybody had these giant flatbed scanners, and it was very difficult to use. And so there was a guy, Pierre Alain Cotte, French guy, who had this idea, and he took a fax machine and he kind of sawed it in half, and he said,
Mm,
"Imagine if it was some tiny little thing," and started had a guy who was writing a little bit of software for it, and I came in, met those guys, and said, "Hey, this could be something really big." And we have the opportunity to create a category here of something really different if we apply all the kinds of ease of use uh, to this space. So you'd want to, if somebody had a resume and they wanted to share it around, you would just take it essentially and put it in. You want to like feed it into your keyboard, have it suck it in, and hand it back to you. Um, and that's what we did. That's the that's what it ended up being.
mm,
So and and you put the piece of paper in, and as soon as you put the edge of the paper in, it sucked it in and spit it back out to you, and gave you a thumbnail of the whatever the document was, or a photo or whatever. And you, if you dragged it down to email, it would package it up and send it over email to somebody who could click on it and get the viewer. If you dragged it down to Photoshop, it would take the JPEG of it, and then we ended up creating APIs and did a Windows and a Mac version, and then marketed the hell out of it. And I think what made the product really so great was that it really broke down all the rules of how people interfaced with that kind of product previously. You know, scanning was a technical thing, and we brought it to, I don't want to scan anything. I just have this bill or this resume or something I want to send to somebody else. And I can't believe I have to go to a fax machine in 1993.
uh-huh.
So that's what we did. Walt Mossberg ended up writing a great article reviewing the product, and he just couldn't say enough good things about it, and that really helped the whole thing take off. But uh, it was a synthesis of hardware and software, and
Hmm.
when you have a hardware hook in something, you can have that unlock all the software revenue streams and keep adding on layers and layers of software products. And the two integrated together in a seamless way is very much the same thing like we did with the iPod and iTunes, where you plug the two of them together and they just do the right thing. You don't have to think about it. Um, it just happens. And it was the same way. It was the tight integration of hardware and software to solve a use case for people that was very challenging and abstract. Same way of trying to load music onto a music player, you were picking this and picking that, and with the iPod, it just said, I'm just going to sync everything that's on your PC and make it be the same.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very similar observation each time of how you look at something and say, and imagine it being better, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm wondering, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what sorts of resources did you tap into, especially in the beginning, to be successful? Did you have certain advisors? Did you read books? Did you look at previous companies as examples? And then what resources were already owned or needed or acquired in the process?
well, we spent a lot of time. So I believe strongly in immersing yourself in the user experience, and
Hmm.
so we went to companies and said, how do you route paper information? And they showed us, like those inner office documents, things that you'd put the paper in, and then there was that piece of string that you went to secure it, and you wrote your name on it to say, here it's coming from me to Jack. So the way that paper was sent around was so archaic. But when you immerse yourself in the user experience and you're steeped in the art of the possible because you're a technologist, it's that fusion of those two things that lets you create something that's really aiming far and creates a vision for something completely new. But you have to do both of those things. You have to really understand the art of the possible from the technology and really immerse yourself in the customer experience. To abstract the little bits of what they're doing and stand back and say, no, but this is how you'd really want to do it. And, there really, at the time, there certainly weren't books. There was no system for doing that.
Hmm.
Um, it was really focusing on the voice of the customer again and again, mocking things up, putting them in front of people, mocking up more changes to that, getting the UI totally right. It was, I think, one of the first companies that really got the UI right in the consumer space. So
Hmm.
much so that when Apple did iPhoto, they copied a lot of the user interface from Visioneer.
Wow.
I know that because Jobs told me that directly. So,
Yeah, that's incredible. Did you have advisors or no? An advisory board?
we didn't. I reached out to a friend of mine who named the product. A friend of mine, Steve Blank, at the time, and Steve loved what we were doing, and he said, "Well, at the time that you had like a serial port on your computer, you had a printer port, so make this the paper port."
Hmm.
And that was the genius behind the name from Steve, and it became the paper port.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. What were your biggest obstacles, and how did you overcome those issues? And what was your decision making process as a founder? And also, I'm wondering, was it hard to get VC funding in the beginning?
Well, back then, I mean, it's always hard to get VC funding, but back then we had tremendous investors. We had Dave Marquardt, and we had what's his name, Roger McNamee, who went on to be one of the Facebook investors, and he wrote the book Zucked about Facebook. So we had really solid investors, and they believed in the vision of the hardware and the software. And that was back in a day where the Valley still invested in consumer hardware kinds of things, where today, not so much. Um, And so, we did the usual thing. We put the pitch deck together and we went around and we raised a little money, then we raised more money. Ultimately, we went through, I want to say, 3 CEOs. And then we hired a 4th CEO, and then we ended up going public.
How did you decide on the CEOs? Was it like, did their values align with your company, or was it some trait that you looked for?
So the first couple of CEOs, the board just said, this is the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
But after 3 CEOs were in there and crashed and burned, the board actually came to me and said, hey, I think you should just run it. And I spent a weekend tossing and turning, trying to decide if that's what I wanted to do. And I really just wanted to be in the position to make the company as successful as possible. And I thought we were at a pretty good point. So if we could see that we were going to go public in the next 6 or 8 months. So I thought, hey, I'll keep the product stuff running great. Let's bring in somebody else. And then I was very involved in that interview process for that guy, but Mike McConnell. But I think, it had its own issues at the day because it was back before the web. So you had to make the software and get it right, and you'd send it out on CDs to people, and then they ran it. And so if you had a bug in the software, it didn't just update on your phone 2 days later. So there was a lot of rigorous testing to make sure it was right, and we did both a Windows and a Mac version. We ended up doing it in 12 different languages. So every time we did a build, we'd build 24 different versions of the product. So there was a lot to get right on the product side.
Yeah. Besides deciding to go public, did you have any major decisions that you had to make, and how did you make those decisions? Was it a team decision, or did the CEO just kind of?
No, I think all the best decisions are team decisions. Mm-hmm. And I think most of the time, if you've got the right core team of people with you in the journey, the team makes a good decision. And so that's pretty much what we did. And we did a thing where we decided to OEM the software to our biggest competitor, which was HP. And they could run that software on the flatbed scanners that they sold. And when you booted up an HP flatbed, it would now come up with Paperport software to get the word out and the branding. And then Compaq at the time, which was a big PC manufacturer, ended up building the scanner right into the keyboard, making it standard on some of their desktops. So we did those big strategic deals all to get visibility and to be bigger than just, a one product company. And those were all very much well-discussed group decisions as a team.
Yeah, that's incredible. So I know you took that experience and then you worked at Remedy Corp and then Apple Computer, then TiVo, and then you became CEO at WordLock and had 22 patents. I'm just wondering, how did you take that founding experience and use it to create or to help another successful tech startup?
Well, I think one of the things that I learned along the way is it doesn't matter what the product is if you get the process right. If you look at the world the right way, whether you're doing consumer hardware software like we did at Visioneer or Remedy enterprise software, which was in all the Fortune 5000 companies, they were wrestling with the same kinds of things of, gee, the product's hard to use, customers have complaints about it, we've got pretty good market share, but it's hard to grow it to that next level. So it was immerse yourself in the user experience and understand the art of the possible, mock a bunch of things up. We redid the whole user interface of everything. And what I realized is whether you're at a startup or whether you're at an existing company, you're either an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur.
Mm-hmm.
But once you learn what to do, it's kind of the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you apply all the same skills and tools and lessons when you're at Dell trying to innovate as you do when there's four of you in a garage and you're trying to innovate.
Yeah.
So that's one of my big takeaways.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's just being resourceful, I feel like, and always thinking on your toes. So yeah, now you worked at Dell and Axon, and now you're CEO of Transformational Products and the CPO at Portola Valley Partners. And so in these roles, you are now able to mentor founders and accelerate their businesses. And obviously I noticed you at the Stanford Class Hockey for Recovery this summer. And I'm just wondering now as an advisor, was it difficult to get your first clients, or because of all the experiences you've had, do people just kind of come to you for advice a lot? How did that work in the beginning?
Well, I would say lots of people come for advice. And I do a lot of just talking to people and helping them, like with Live 360 and all the Stanford work. But then it's going deeper into relationships that people want to pay you for, right? To make it a paid transaction. But I think it's the lessons from 25 years of doing this successfully about how to paint a vision that people will follow and how to get everybody to follow that vision. How do you really look at the world that your customer is in and aim far to make it hugely better, not just incrementally, but transformationally, which is why I named the company that way. You know, gain confidence because you immerse yourself in the customer experience and deeply understand the art of the possible. You believe in the people that you're working with, listen to them, and if you believe in them and you paint this fantastic vision, then they believe in you, and if you listen to them and modify that as you go, they'll follow you on the whole journey. And those kinds of learnings, I think, are fundamental and pretty much apply to every industry and every phase of company, from two people in a garage trying to start Live 360 to, you know, working at Dell and trying to get people to do new things. So,
yeah, that's great advice. I'm wondering, besides customer experience, is there one very, very important aspect that also allows you to find product market fit?
yeah, I think really understanding how to gather voice of the customer is critical. Really doing that in a way that works is kind of indispensable. And, you know, a lot of companies, you know, like when I started at Axon, they had done several products that had failed, and the CEO said, hey, well, we didn't get any customer input on this stuff. And it's like, okay, you know, and, you know, a lot of companies I talk with, you know, and you say, well, how many current customers and prospective customers have you interviewed? And they said, we know the right thing to do. Our engineers really understand, and we don't need to go talk to customers, you know, and Blank has a great way of saying that of, you know, get out of the building. There's no data in the building. And it sounds so obvious, but,
Hmm.
and Steve and I have talked about forever. It's like those were the painful lessons that we learned over the last several decades of doing this. And he's done a wonderful job of codifying that in the Lean Launchpad. But, I'd say 75% of the companies that I consult with, big and small. I was talking to a company the other day that was 75 million, and they said, yeah, we really don't have a vision of where we're going. And I said, well, how much time do you spend with your customers? And they said, oh, our engineers totally understand their pain points, and, we almost never talk to the customers. It's like, okay, so it's amazing, you know. And so I think that's a huge piece that every single person who's trying to innovate in anything needs to immerse themselves in that customer experience, and then mock it up, put it in front of people. With WordLock, we took a regular combination lock and we filled all the numbers in with plastic. And then I went to a jewelry store and had the guy engrave letters on the wheels, and we made a lock that had letters instead of numbers, and it spelled thousands of words. And we took it around to high schools and junior high schools and colleges and gyms, and we got all the validation that we needed about what we were doing, and then we patented it and trademarked it and started a company. We ended up selling, 20 million units worldwide. We were in 11 countries, and my wife and I started that company together.
Yeah, that's wild.
But it's really the same distilled process, those 4 or 5 lessons.
Yeah. What do you think? I know customer experience is probably the most important aspect to a very successful company. I'm just wondering what's the best way to go about it in your experience? Do surveys work? Just mass surveys, or do one-on-one interviews work? What sorts of techniques work best for customer experience?
Well, I think, going and following the customers around is the best way to do it.
Okay.
Because if you ask people, it's like the old joke, if Ford asked everybody, what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? They wouldn't have said the car. So it's the same kind of thing. Most people have no idea what they want because they don't understand the art of the possible. Right? Oh, I didn't know you could make a solid state hard drive right? So people just don't understand the technology well enough, and they understand their problem. So I think it's mocking it up, putting it in front of people. It's living with the customers as much as you can. I don't think surveys are very good for that. You have to be in the room, putting stuff up in front of them, painting the vision, and saying, hey, if we did this big vision, what would it look like? Like with Live 360, it's like, hey, we have this vision that, people from around the world can learn from each other, and so we're going to create this curated library of films that are tied to different curriculums, and so a teacher could go in and browse and pick the curriculum they're in, and it would say these films, and then here's the schools, and they're tied in, and the schools can schedule it together, and then there's a discussion, and it translates into different languages and synchronizes the time zones, and it's like you paint that vision and then see how that resonates with people. If not, then you modify parts of it, but you have to be able to paint the whole picture as if that world existed for people. There's lots of other stuff. You got to hire the right people, and people have to be open, and you got to run like hell, and you got to be committed and do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's really hard work, and most startups fail, and all of that stuff. But to me, the core of trying to get it right, you need all those, the confluence of the right team and everybody on the same page, or everybody who can wrestle through a conversation and end up on the same page. You need all those things too, for sure.
What would you say? I've been thinking about this a lot. What would you say is the right amount of people on a founding team? Is there such thing as having too many people on a founding team? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, 1 is too few, 10 is too many. But if there's 3 to 5, it's probably a good number. That's what I would think.
How many co-founders were part of Visioneer?
There was Pierre, there was Shelley. I would say 4.
Okay.
So, and 2 at Wordlock, and I'm thinking back, I've been in 8 startups. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're trying to do a Sun Microsystems, you probably need, it always starts with a small number of people, but I think 3 to 5 is probably a good founding number. And then quickly you say, wow, this is a big task. We're going to need a database jock and a AI jock and right?
Yeah.
And then ultimately salespeople and channel people and.
By now, you've probably seen numerous success stories. Is there any overlap or common denominator you see within successful startups? So basically, in other words, is there one aspect or trait, I mean, as an advisor, that you look for when you want to get involved in a startup?
Well, people have to be amazingly passionate. A lot of the teams that I've coached out of Stanford, when you talk about passion, they kind of give you a blank look. And so what I say to young founders and teams is, so think of something in your life that you've been really passionate about. And tell me and the group what it was, and we go around the team. And you would be amazed at how often the teams will be with people who say, I liked, playing tennis, but I wouldn't say I was passionate about it or really was consumed by it. And some people who have done sports will say, man, I was on the rugby team and woke up every day and that was all we thought about, or the water polo team. And it's like, okay, so you have to know what passion's about, where you're like, I could be Fortnite. I don't care. But it's like, I'm waking up every day, 7 days a week, and this is all I'm thinking about. And if you've had that experience, it's much more translatable into a startup. So I look for people who are deeply passionate about what they're doing, really committed to what they're doing, because it's a hell of a journey and it beats a lot of people down. I look for people with a subject matter expertise. What are they bringing to the party? They got, they're a machine learning expert, they're a, UI expert, they're a database, something, hardware. But often you get teams of people that came together because they thought it'd be cool to start a company. And you kind of go, okay, but what are each of you good at? Each founder has to bring a proportional, the same amount to the party. When it's you and it's 100%, and you bring on somebody else, if that person isn't 50% now, you just dropped, right? If the next person isn't, hey, I am at least as valuable as these other two, and bringing my own stuff, because now you're 300%. And so each person that you add has to bring a huge amount to the party, certainly as the founders.
Mm-hmm.
So I look for that everybody has an expertise, they're passionate, there's a reason of why they're doing what they're doing. Hey, you know, my mom had this disease and so I'm doing this, or my father was a firefighter, so I'm doing that. And, you know, I look for people who really are trying to change the world that they're working in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's through passion and knowledge. And how do you know when someone's resourceful though? Like it's kind of hard to screen someone right away based off a pitch if they know what they're doing. Because I feel like passion can be learned, but how do you know when someone truly knows what they're doing? I'm sure you've seen so many pitches.
Well, I think you got to spend time with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, usually the first meeting, you get a pretty good read of, you know, who's real and who's not.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell, you know, is everybody contributing? So if you've got 4 people on a call and one of them's doing all the talking, I always start to get into a dialogue with the other people on the team to see how conversant they are. And not everybody has to be a conversationalist, but everybody has to understand what they're doing, be deeply into it, even if their area is a separate area. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And then lastly, I just wanted to ask if you had to choose a single word to characterize yourself, what would it be and why?
well, I think one of the things that makes good entrepreneurs is perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to, you know, you're going to run into walls. It's just the process. You're trying to do something that's never been done. Well, it hasn't been done not because it was trivial. It hasn't been done because it's complicated or it's hard for a number of reasons. So you're going to hit a wall. You got to go over it or under it or around it or through it, or you just have to be incredibly perseverant. So, you know, there's creativity, there's doing that vision thing, there's being really good at listening to the customer and saying, oh, I hear what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And you play it back to them and they're like, wow, I don't think I said any of that, but that's right. That's the vision. That's where I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if I had to boil it down to one thing, I'd say perseverance is kind of indispensable. And I screened for that, you know, for decades as I hired people. I screened for that trait.
Mm-hmm.
You know, were they smart? Did they learn something else new? Tell me an example of something that you didn't know anything about before and you learned it. It could be, I don't care, it could be, you know, the history of Churchill, you know, could be surfboards, I don't care what it is. But tell me, go on about something for 10 minutes and tell me 5 things that I don't know about it because you got so deeply into it. Great, because you're going to have to do that same deep dive into whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah.
But you need the perseverance to do that when the going gets tough, which inevitably it will.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That must have been fun screening for that. Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you want to add about your story or anything you think is important for me to include in my report?
I think the people get really hung up on, I'm a hardware guy, I'm a software guy. And I say guy, but I mean that obviously generically, that, you know, person. That's gender independent. But, or I'm an enterprise person, I'm a consumer person, I'm a UI person, I'm a, you know. And to me, my lessons learned is don't think of it that way. If you get the process, you got perseverance, you're creative, You can really listen to the customer experience and play back a vision. You understand the art of the possible. You can immerse yourself. You know the process of mocking stuff up. When you learn how to do that, you can do it in anything. You know, I can help people selling alcohol, vape pens, you know, enterprise software, enterprise hardware, because the process is the same. Once you get that, and it helps, I think, to step back and think of it that way. And I think that's some of the beauty of what Steve's done is made it be, I don't care what it is, you know.
Yeah, universal. Yeah.
It is universal, and it's big company, small company, you know, entrepreneur, intrapreneur. You know, how do you innovate? And most people don't know how to do that, and they incrementally, you know, I got a 1.0 and I'm going to make a new product and it's, you know, a 1.5, and it's like, yeah, it's a little better, but you didn't really do that big thing. You didn't do that transformational thing. And I think in every industry, that transformational thing is just waiting for somebody to do it.
Well, thanks so much, Todd. It's been amazing. Thanks for all the advice and your experience. I appreciate it on Labor Day, especially.
Yeah, no problem. All right. And good luck with everything, and keep in touch on Live 360.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any plans for the day or no?
Well, it's 105 and the air quality is unusable. We were out early walking the dog, but it's smoky and the air's like, the AQI index is like 140 or something here. So
yeah, it's crazy. It's like the world's ending.
Where are you?
I'm in LA, but I have some studying to do, so I'll probably just work on that.
Is it hot there too?
Yeah, it's been 100 in the triple digits the past 3 days. I think it's supposed to be triple digits today too. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Well, I'll keep in touch.
All right.
Yep.
Take care.
Have
Bye-bye.
a good one. Bye.